the Polgar Chess University. After spending the last two lessons on discoveries, discovered checks, and when they work, when they don't, in this lesson we'll go on to a sister subject of it, namely the double checks. Double checks are a special version of discovered checks, only they are even more powerful. It's pretty much as powerful as it gets. Let me show you what I mean. Here we are in our first position in this lesson, where Black obviously has a clear material advantage, having both his rooks and two extra pawns as well, while White only has a rook and bishop. So Black is ahead by 4 points on the numeric value. Black also, with his last move, has moved his rook to c8, and guess what they want to do? They would like to capture the bishop on c2. In fact, that would be a check to the White king. However, luckily for White, it's White's turn in this position. If you listen carefully to the last couple of lessons, you'll notice that the White bishop, the White rook, and the Black king are all on the same diagonal. And that enables White to give a discovered check. In fact, White has a whole bunch of different ways to give discovered checks. Moreover, anywhere the White rook would go to would be a discovered check. However, there is only one real good one. For example, moving the rook to d4, which would give a discovered check, would be a really bad way to try to give discovery, because the Black rook would be free to capture the White bishop that's giving the check. And not only that, White is in check right now, but lost a bishop. Going back to our starting position, if you look carefully, you'll notice that the rook is able to go to h4. At first it seems that the Black pawn from g5 could capture it, but in all reality it cannot, because remember, a king can never ever remain in check. And right now the White bishop is also attacking the Black king in addition to the White rook. Therefore, if you look at this position, when White now attacks the Black king with both the bishop and the rook, we'll notice that the Black king has no escape. When we give double checks, almost never is it possible to block both checks at the same time. Therefore, this is checkmate. Black got checkmated. Let's move on to our next example, where Black this time is attacking again the White bishop on g2 with the pawn. If White would waste the time in this position and move the bishop away from the attack, then Black would get the time to either move the king away from a discovered check, or, for example, block the discovery that is put another piece in between the king and the White pieces. This is a typical example when time is important in chess. I don't mean the time on the chess clock, but the time on the chess board, not giving the opponent time to defend against our threats. In the starting position, it's White's turn, and despite the fact that the White bishop has been attacked, White does not need to move that bishop. Instead, the White rook can move, creating a discovered double check. By capturing the Black pawn on a5, now both the rook and the bishop attack the king. Therefore, there is no way to block the checks, for example, with the pawn. The only legal move is moving the king out of the check. neither the rook or the bishop can be captured, because then that other piece would hit the king. So the only legal move in this position for black is to move the king to b8. And now white is ready to checkmate the black king by moving the white rook up to the corner, and the black king has no escape because the bishop protects the rook. Let's see some more different ideas on how to checkmate with double checks. The next position, white seems to have a decisive material advantage, having an extra queen. The first idea seems that let's use the discovery that we can give, for example, by capturing the white pawn on c3, attacking the white king, and at the same time the white queen. Typically, that's what we go for, to give a discover check and at the same time trying to attack the most valuable piece of our opponent. However, in this case, after the white king would move out of the check, and the knight captures the queen and the bishop captures back, it would still leave white with material advantage, as white has an extra knight. Let's go back again to the starting position and see if black can do better. Remember, I always say, when you see a good move, look around, see if you have a better one. But what may be better than winning our opponent's queen? Well, of course, if you can checkmate. Well, black cannot checkmate in this position in just one move, but they can in two. And white can do nothing about it. And the correct solution is to give double check by playing knight to f2. Now, not only that the black knight attacks the white king, but so does the bishop from b7. Therefore, the knight cannot be captured, and neither can the check be blocked. The white king must move out of the double attack. And now, black has a beautiful checkmate at his disposal by playing knight to h3. Remember this pattern. It can be very useful and very effective. Always remember, when you can checkmate, it's much better than win the opponent's queen. Let's move on to our next example, when for a change, white is using a double check to win material. White is unable to force checkmate, even though they have an attempt. By knight captures pawn, white would be creating a double check, attacking the black king. Now, if the black king would move e8 back to its initial square, then all of a sudden the white rook would move up to d8 and announce checkmate. However, when you play chess, you always need to consider not only your best moves, but also look out for your opponent's best responses. And in this case, the black king could also move to c7, and then there is no checkmate around. And in fact, there is a material balance. In the meantime, the white knight would need to move, and then white would have no advantage at all. Instead, in this position, by playing for a trick with knight c6, which with black's correct response does not work, with the correct move instead, giving the double check from knight e6, then white can win the black rook. As we can see, now the white rook attacks the king as well as the white knight. Therefore, black is unable to block the check with the rook. And when the king moves out, then knight takes rook, and white won a rook. Compare this with knight to f3 discover check in the starting position, which would not work successfully because the black rook could simply block the check, and after rook takes rook, pawn takes rook, black would maintain their advantage. Let's go back again to an example when white can force checkmate in 2 moves. In this position, black's material advantage is very obvious, having an extra rook and bishop. By now, I bet you know that white can make a discovered check by moving the knight. The question is, which is the correct move? Is it to f5 or is it to g6? Knight f5 doesn't look bad because then if the black king moves to g8, white would be ready to checkmate. I bet you can figure this one out. Yes, indeed. It's knight to e7 checkmate. Again, it's one of those situations that you need to consider not only looking for your good moves, but also as of your opponent. Therefore, in this position after knight f5, if you notice black's correct response, bishop to h6, you realize that black would maintain his significant material advantage and have a winning position. In the meantime, you already missed your opportunity to win the game. Let's go back to this position and try to think again. Well, again, the correct solution is to give the double check. Obviously, the knight is taboo. The knight cannot be captured because also the white rook is attacking the black king. The check cannot be blocked because both the knight and the rook attack the king. Therefore, the only legal move is to move the king to g8. And now that very same checkmate that before didn't quite work with black's correct defense, now we achieve it and black did not have a way out. A very nice checkmate. Let's move on to our next example, where black again has a very significant material advantage, still having their queen on the board. The queen is also attacking the white bishop at the moment. Therefore, moving the rook away, giving a discovered check, even though the black king has no legal moves, black would be allowed to capture the bishop safely. If white would try to improve on this very plan and move the rook to g4, so after the queen takes bishop, the white rook could capture the black queen, then the problem would be that black could also simply block the check and be home safe. So what should white do in this position to win the game? Well, in this case, white has an elegant combination, giving up one of his 2 rooks to force the black king into a mating net, and then on the second move announce checkmate. Let's see how this would work. The correct solution is, well, try to find it before you go on further. And now, when you come back, here is the answer. Rook to g8, a brilliant combination. The black rook is not allowed to capture the white rook here because the white bishop is also attacking the king. Therefore, black has only one legal move, and that is king captures rook. And now, white can checkmate by moving the rook to the open g file, and game over. Let's move on to a next example, where again white can checkmate in 2 moves if they find the correct sequence. In this position, black has again material advantage, having an extra bishop and pawn. You already know by now what we're looking for. We're looking for a double check. Even though the white rook is under attack from the black bishop, that doesn't matter when we give double checks. It does matter when we give only a discovered check. Now in this position, white has 2 choices of double checks, going to d6 with the knight or going to f6. If black plays correctly, one of them does not work, yet the other one forces checkmate in 2 moves. Can you think and figure out which is the correct answer? Well, if the knight goes to d6, then the king should not go to f8, but it could go to d7, and black would be alive. On the other hand, after the correct answer, that is knight f6, double check, it does not matter whether the king goes to the king side or the queen side. In either case, white would checkmate by bringing the rook up to e8. Another important pattern to remember. And let's move on to the next one. When again, black has a significant material advantage having an extra queen, but yet white, using the double check, can force checkmate in 2 moves. Hopefully, you'll get it real quick by now. Where is the double check? And the double check is moving the bishop to f6. Now both the bishop and the rook attack the king. Therefore, the black knight is unable to capture the bishop on f6 and leaves black with only one legal move, moving the king to g8. And now the checkmate is moving the rook to h8, and again it's game over. Now here comes a real simple one. Hopefully you just glance at it and you can figure out how to checkmate here. We know we're looking for a discover check. In fact, we're looking for a double check. Now there is a move to look at, that is knight c5, which takes away the escape square of the king on d7 and attacks the king by the rook. The problem with this move is that while the black king cannot move, while black cannot capture the check-giving piece, that is the rook on e1, black can block the check simply and be home safe and be a queen ahead. Therefore, it's really important to find the correct answer here. Giving double check from d6 wouldn't quite do it either, because the black king could safely escape on d7. Yet, if white combines all of these ideas and gives the double check from f6 and guarding the d7 square, in that case, black can neither escape nor block the check and not capturing the knight on f6 either. Let's move on to the next example, where we'll use double check to gain significant material. In this position, black is already a knight ahead, and if you look carefully, you will find that black has a very nasty attack, a very nasty threat. Can you see what black's threat is? Well, I didn't mean just capturing the knight on c6. It's nastier than that. It's queen capturing the pawn on g2, which would be a checkmate. Therefore, it's really important that white finds the correct move, and that is a double check with knight e7. Not only the white knight attacks the king now, but so does the white rook from c1. As we already know, in such situations, the only thing black can do is moving the king, and then white would simply capture the black queen, gaining major material. And let's move back to some more checkmate ideas using double checks. Here we go. In this position again, black has still his queen on the board, while white doesn't. Even though white has 2 rooks, so white has an extra rook. And that rook on c7 is attacked at the moment. And again, it's extremely crucial that white looks for a more aggressive and ambitious move than just moving the rook away, which would give time for black to block the threat to the king. For example, after rook b7, black could put either his knight or his bishop to g7, and there wouldn't be any more ideas of discover checks or double checks. Again, it's important not to miss the opportunity to give a double check. Remember, there is a bishop on b3, therefore the g8 square is guarded, so the black king has only one legal move, neither a white rook or knight could be captured, so the king would move to h8. And now, white is ready to checkmate with the rook on h7. Try to remember all these different patterns how to checkmate a king. But one thing what's even more important in this particular lesson is to notice what's common in all of these examples that we're seeing in this lesson. And that is that we're using a double check to gain either material or to reach checkmate. Here we go, the next position. Black is offering trade of queens in this position. As we know, any trade of pieces typically helps the side that's ahead in material. And in this case, black having a rook versus a knight, obviously black is ahead, the rook being a more valuable piece. In this position, white has two different double checks at his disposal. Give a check on g5 or on f6. Neither can be captured because a white queen would also be checking the black king at the same time. Here it's rather important where the knight goes. If it would go to g5, the black king would get to escape through f8, and at this stage white would run out of checks. The correct answer, on the other hand, is moving the knight to f6. Now the knight not only attacks the king, but it also attacks the g8 square. Black is forced to move the king, and now queen h7 results checkmate. Let's move on to the next examples, where white again will use in these and the following two examples the double check to win material, to win the opponent's queen. Here again, black is trying to offer an exchange of queens. Again, time is the element. If white would try to move out of that with the idea that on the following move to give a discovered check, that would be too slow because black would get the time to move his king out of any potential discoveries or double checks. The correct move is knight to f6, after which the black king needs to move and white can capture the queen with a knight. And the next example, very, very similar, but now the black queen is on h3. So in this case, the check on f6 wouldn't do much because the king would escape through g7. On the other hand, white can win the black queen by giving the double check from g5. Again, the king needs to move, and then the queen is lost. Let's move on. In this position, we're using our bishop to create double check and to win the black queen. Here, white has two ways to win the black queen, but one is much superior than the other. Again, very important. Remember, you need to look out for your opponent's best moves too. At first it seems it's the same whether the white bishop moves to f3 or g6, attacking both the king and the queen. However, if you look carefully, you'll notice that after bishop f3, black can block the check with that queen that has been just attacked, and the only way white will win the queen is by giving up his own rook as well, which is better than nothing, but clearly a lot worse then playing bishop to g6, which is a double check, and then black had no choice but to move out. Bishop takes queen, and white is a bishop ahead. And finally, let's see our last example in this lesson. And this is a very famous one called the smothered mate. I promise you, we'll return to this subject, to this pattern, in one of the future lessons. But for now, I'd like to introduce it to you because it involves also a double check. In this case, the white queen is under attack, and if the queen would move away, the black rook could capture the white knight. The correct way to go is to give a double check, which in itself wouldn't do much. But in combination with the following beautiful, beautiful combination, it will result in checkmate in just 2 more moves. Queen g8, check again, leaving black only with one option. Rook captures queen, and now as you can see, the poor black king is surrounded with all of his own pieces, and that's what causes its trouble. Knight f7, beautiful smothered mate. Well, I hope you got a good idea of what double checks are about and how powerful they are. Use them in your own games. I bet you will win a lot more games than you did so far. Thank you for listening, and so long until next week.